Welcome, everybody. So today is all about talent. For the next 45, 50 minutes, I'll try to do it. I did come in and delete a couple slides because I thought I'm going to go long, but I'll try my best. So Susan Boydell, just like she said, I am from Barlow McCarthy is a very small niche consulting company that specializes in the space you heard her talk about, referral development. Do any of you have physician liaisons or sales team? I see a couple of heads going or whatever. That's our space. However, today is going to be about all talent, okay? So I'll be giving you some examples because I got some good ones in the physician relations space, okay? But this is for anybody that's looking to build their bench with really great talent. So marketing folks, mostly? Raising hands, yes. Nodding heads, yes. Anybody not marketing? Yes. And we got one. Where are you?
Community Outreach and Foundation.
Oh, okay. So this is going to be a little in that same space too, which is really good. Okay, so here's a little, let's see if I can move this thing. Oh, I like it. Okay, topics for today. I'm curious, I'll look for nodding heads again on this one. How many of you are challenged with finding good talent today? Yeah, I saw some instant heads or whatever. I would say in the last 12 months in particular, probably was a little bit there before that, but we all just sort of blamed it all on the pandemic and said it'll change. It has not changed. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like now and how it's presenting itself in our companies, not just healthcare, but across the board from that perspective. And then I want to spend some time just talking about if we had to rethink our hiring strategy, what would that look like? Love it if we had some HR people in here because you kind of want to say, I'm going to need you on board for this, but let's talk about what that rehiring looks like from that perspective. We're going to talk about how many of you are leaders or managers or something have some people that report to you, I assume, since you're in a talent one here, yeah. Okay, because we're going to talk a little bit about, as leaders, what our role is and about our purpose from a leading perspective, because it kind of creates the foundation for what helps make this possible across the board. I can say in the space of physician relations that the talent we were hiring even 2 years ago is not the same talent we need today. Same in marketing? Does it look different? Different skill set? Yeah, okay. So some of that in your space. I know in physician relations, it's a lot of it. That those roles have completely changed. And then we're just going to talk about, okay, once I got them, I think I got some really good talent. How do I keep them? How do I onboard them so that they feel like they belong to something great? And then how do I get the best out of them to make them great performers for what the organization needs? Okay, so let's dig in. Everyone's heard the Great Resignation, okay? It's really fascinating to me because I went and Googled again, okay? So this was from labor statistics, okay? And I Googled it again last night to say, well, do those numbers or has anything changed? Not really. In fact, it might be slightly worse in terms of the number of people that are continuing to leave their jobs from that perspective. It's interesting when you do a little research on this Great Resignation, because there's a lot of opinions about whether or not it's just people left their jobs during the pandemic. You know, you think about all the restaurant workers and all that. I don't know about you, but you can go to a restaurant now and half the restaurant will not even be seating anybody because they got no staff. And we see the same thing probably in our hospitals and our health systems in terms of some of those roles that are extremely difficult to fill from that perspective. And the whole piece of all of this also that sort of resonates to me, because we talk to doctors so much, but I can put our nurses, I could probably put you guys in this bucket too, but this whole thing of burnout. I mean, I think doctors are living on the edge and nurses are living on the edge. And so when you think about that living on the edge, and what that, I use this story a lot because this was probably maybe a year and a half, I'm gonna say, into the pandemic. And it was my husband's primary care physician, so family practice, he was family practice. And he wasn't old, okay? He wasn't 60 plus, okay? And he called up for his annual physical, okay? And they said he's retiring. He's retiring. And I remember going, well, he doesn't look the right age, and he's not, but just decided that he was hanging up the shingle. I don't know what he ended up doing, because that's always the fascinating piece when you think about this. What do people do? Where are they going? What are they doing? All of those sorts of things. They're just not doing the jobs that people used to do. I did find that workers, okay, wait a minute, I got to get this right. 1 out of every 5 workers will quit in 2022. 1 out of 5. So I don't know about you guys on LinkedIn, and do you guys read Becker's, okay? Get the hospital review or the CEO review of Becker's, and there's always the one article that says that CEOs or C-suite people who are moving around. The list of the number of people moving around is so long. And the number of, now maybe this is just LinkedIn, okay? But when I go on LinkedIn, there's that little graphic that they do when you get to say you're moving into a different job or whatever. My thing is full of it. And most of my connections are healthcare people. They're people in health, they're people that do what you do. They're physician relations people, they're marketing people. There's some C-suite folks and all of that or whatever from mostly hospitals and health systems. And that little graphic on my daily feed, sometimes I swear it's every other one, that somebody's taking a different job. And so that's a fascinating thing to me. So it's also those that intend to leave, okay, in their jobs in the next, it's like a very high percentage of people who intend to leave, which means they are thinking they're going or wanting to do something different from that perspective. So this whole space is part of the whole challenge of that whole piece. Okay, so why do people want to switch jobs? Well, some of this is probably easy as pie for all of you, okay? But the number one piece of it, anything anyone's read as leaders all know, poor leadership at their current employer. I don't feel valued. I don't like their style. I read some articles where they use the word toxic work environment. You go, ooh, that's kind of scary. I feel very lucky. I've never worked in a toxic work environment. But all of those sorts of things, why people intend to leave or switch. This whole piece of remote working. So I had a friend that recently was offered a job with one of the for-profit health systems, okay, national for-profit health systems. And they told her she needed to be in the office at least 3 days a week. And she said no. And they came back and said, okay, we'll take you. You can work from home. I know you're a little surprised. I was a little surprised because, I remember I worked for 2 very large health systems. And I can remember with my marketing team, I was in the marketing side of it, I can remember having to fight hard for flexible Fridays, letting people work from home, letting people have a 4-day work week and Fridays off or Mondays off, or there's all different variations of that. Fought hard because it's what the team said they wanted, not only for their own well-being, but for work-life balance. Give me a day so I can go do all the stuff I need to do, or give me a day so I'm just not in here for a day type of thing. I never won. I never, ever won. And the biggest reason I never won was, now some of it could have been my leadership that I was reporting to or whatever, people just don't work as hard if they're working at home. I think we all learned during the pandemic, that's not true. I learned it the moment I went into consulting, okay? So as soon as I went into consulting, there I am in my little home office, okay? I remember saying when I joined Barlow McCarthy, I said, my biggest fear is lack of social interaction. I said, I love an office. I love being around people. I love being able to walk down the hall and grab somebody. I love all of that social interaction. And now I'm at home. I still get it, mostly with flight attendants. But but that was the piece that I thought I would miss. What I figured out really quickly was I was producing 5 times the amount of work because I was never in any, I was on a lot of calls and stuff, but I was never in any meetings. I was all those things that You know, I could work at 8 o'clock at night if I wanted to work at 8 o'clock at night. You know, so I'm sure most of you have read a lot about, it's not about how you do the work, it's getting the work done. I don't care. If you want to work at midnight, work at midnight. If the work gets done and the work gets done better, I don't care when you do it. And so that didn't come until the pandemic. So when you think about it from that perspective and the whole remote piece of it, this limited visibility when it comes to career paths, we're going to talk a little bit about that, okay? About how we invest in making sure if somebody wants to learn and grow in an organization. So if you've ever had an interview, when somebody's told you on the interview that they're looking for advancement opportunities, we got to listen really closely. Because if they told you that in an interview, I say the day they accept the job, should you give it to them, okay, then we start on that career ladder for them. Because that was a need they said right up front. And I think so often we just sort of push it aside. And so I think it's a real important piece. So we'll talk a lot about that potential and how I grow my people and how I'm being proactive in that piece and involving them in that piece from that perspective. Anybody see anything different in this? No? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about talent. It's not just about finding great talent, but it's about finding the right talent. That was a little why I asked you, are you looking for different people or different things today than perhaps you might have been looking for before? And what does that look like? And so it's really understanding that piece of it. We're going to talk a lot about skills because I think it plays a lot into how you find really good talent and the right talent when you think of skill sets versus experience from that perspective. Before we do it, though, I want to talk about this leading with purpose. Okay, we all have them. Every organization has your mission statement, your values, your vision statement, all of those sort of things. I like to think about this from when you think about your department and the talent you're trying to get and the team you're trying to build to deliver on what you need to deliver. To focus on that intentionality of what is the purpose of your team. So it's not only what we do, but it's why we do it. And I put this up here because I say it's a really good thing to go, well, if I'm not overly clear on that, you know, we can be pretty general about it. But if you think about how I get really tight on what your purpose is, I often say in the physician relations space, what is the one thing you do that no one else in the organization can do or can provide from the organization? So in physician relations, that piece is every day their job is to go out and talk to referring physicians, face-to-face, maybe Zoom now, but their job was to talk. So when I think of marketing, the consumer is in your space, you know, all of that sort of thing. These folks are actually having face-to-face conversations every day with the referring physician. The value of that to the organization and to leadership, what you can bring back in terms of, I'm just going to say plain old voice of physician as a customer, that intelligence is worth gold from that perspective. There are others that talk to referring physicians in the organization. I always say your leaders are talking to physicians all day long. Usually those are those doctors way at the top of the list that give you all their business and you can't afford to lose them. They have the easy button right into the CEO's office. Those are different. These are those everyday, the ones that are probably burned out there, those everyday primary care physicians that are out there seeing those patients every day that make the referrals that end up somehow in our hospitals or in our services from that perspective. You could do the same thing in the marketing space, in the community relations space, all of that. What's the purpose? And I love looking at it from, well, what do I do that nobody else in this organization can do from that perspective? The whole rest of this is all about the plan piece of this and everything is that intentionality piece. Am I really clear on what our purpose is in this organization? And if I needed to clearly articulate that to a brand new team member, how would I do that? And it's a fascinating thing sometimes to say, well, if I did that with somebody who is brand new, I would love for you to go back after 3 months or 6 months and say, is what I told you clear? Is that what you're doing? Did we miss the mark? Because they're going to have different thoughts in their mind than those of us that have been there for a while and doing the job for a while and all of those sorts of things. So leading with purpose from that perspective. I could give you, I wrote down an example on here that if you just Google leading with purpose, you can, like Google has their purpose statement. So these aren't mission statements, these are purpose statements, okay? Now, this is Google, okay? Really big, okay, from that perspective. But when I say it, you'll go, yeah, that's them, that's who they are. To help organize the world's information and make it universally accessible to people all over the world. So when you think about that, you know, well, yeah, gosh darn it, that's Google. It's doing the same thing in our departments and our teams and being able to define that piece of it from that perspective. So core questions, understanding what your responsibilities in those pieces are. What are you expected to deliver? Sometimes we hear from new team members that I sort of knew what the job was. I had done sort of a job like that before, but sometimes I'm not overly clear on what that is. That's our job. That's our job, to be able to do that piece. This whole piece on cultural fit, I'll spend a little bit of time on that, but you guys get that piece. And your HR teams help a lot with that in terms of there's usually some sort of test everybody has to take that tells you from a values perspective. But the cultural fit for you as a leader, I'm sure most of you have interviewed folks before and asked them, so what kind of leader do you like to work for? Or give me an example of a really good leader and what made them great to you. And listening to the words that they use and the things they say, it says a lot. Because if they talk about how they had a lot of autonomy, it tells you something. Versus how they were involved in things, might tell you something different. You know, so the words or how they describe that often can tell you or give you a lot of insight onto that cultural fit within the team from that perspective. And why you as the leader? I always think those are great questions to ask ourselves sometimes. You know, it's like, why? So why? You know, it's like when I think back to one of my, who I would say was probably one of the best leaders I ever worked with. And I think about what it was that I liked about that or admired about that or actually felt the value in it, okay? He pushed me in some crazy ways. I mean, things that you would go, there's no way I could do that in a million years. And he pushed. And I bet there's people we think about on our teams where we go, I think they've got that in them, but I don't think they know they have that in them. And how we push them to do things and try things. Sometimes it's a learning thing just for us to say, well, let me see how they handled that difficulty or learning something new or something they weren't comfortable with. But it's also for the team member. So when you think about those folks who say they want to advance, it's a great way of thinking about how we do that piece. And that's that whole piece of why you as a leader. And how do I build the team that I need to? And how do I need to show up? How do I need to show up? You know, like, right, I think now about anybody that went through the pandemic, let's just think of nursing leaders and how they needed to show up every day. If any of you are in a crisis mode in your hospital, how you have to show up for your team is very different than when you're not, so say in that way. So how you need to show up, and it changes from that perspective as well. You know, I think about teams that have had, there's a client that we're working with where we did some interviews with some liaisons and then their leaders that they were reporting to. And through all levels of that, they said, one of the key things that they said, which was a very factual thing about the organization was, well, we've had 5 different CEOs over the past 4 years or something. Like there was this revolving door of CEOs. Now, I don't know about any of you, but I think about how that must feel in an organization when the CEO level changes. I've been very fortunate to work in organizations where the CEO didn't change that often, but the moment the CEO did change, the culture changed, not overnight, but people come in with different things from that perspective. And so that said a lot. It said, okay, you got to make sure that whatever leader you put in to run this team, they need to be committed, like you got to get it right, because these folks have had a lot of change. And they're skeptical about is this one going to stay? Maybe they're not. All of that sort of thing just resonates with the team from that perspective. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I think it's also an interesting thing to think of. What's your leadership style? Remember, I was saying that it's a great interview question to ask people. Who do you like to work for? And when I think of where I fit in this, it's probably a little bit of a combination of a couple of them. I sit in that advancer one because I'm very results driven, but I'm also very much team oriented. I love building a team. Love building a team. Love getting the right people, love inspiring people, all of that sort of thing. But each of those are going to look different in terms of what you get from that. So it's always fascinating to think of, well, here's where you are. Where's your boss? Where's maybe the C-suites or even your CEO, all of those sort of things. Have any of you all taken the DISC test before? DISC? Yeah. So when you think, I use DISC a lot in terms of, DISC is D is a driver, A is intuitive, S is a steady, and C is compliant or something. And when you have most leaders, CEOs, are going to sit in that driver bucket, and drivers want to hear nothing but action, nothing but action. And if you then take a steady who are extremely analytical, okay, and analytical people oftentimes are looking for mistakes. If you're just cracking the whip and wanting something yesterday, no way it's going to happen in a million years, because that's not how they work and how they think. So the DISC is a good thing to just even understand, well, who do I have sitting in front of me and what's important to them from that word? The intuitive people are always the fun people. It's always like they're very much people. And if you talk analytically to an intuitive person, tune you right on out. They're just it's like not their thing by any stretch of the imagination. We do it a lot with physicians in thinking about when you're talking to different types of physician specialties, because it changes how you would have a conversation with them based on where they sit from that perspective. Okay, so bench strength. This is one I gave you as an example, okay? But this is that whole piece of looking at, well, what do I have right now? And so if you go back to my purpose and what my organization needs, okay, how am I set up to deliver that in the future? Am I lopsided? Am I pretty balanced? Am I missing a skill that I know I'm going to need that my team doesn't have right now? And how would I then get that, either build it within my team, or if I'm hiring, I'm looking for that skill set because it's missing from that perspective. So what are the gaps that I have from that perspective? I use this, we use this a lot with teams in terms of trying to figure out what they need to hire. Because like I said, physician relations has gone through dramatic change in terms of what type of person you need to be successful. And to do this job. And so this was just some of it from that perspective. The very bottom one uses data to inform field decisions. So they're out in the field, they're salespeople, okay? Uses data. I'm going to tell you, we never cared if anybody could analyze any piece of data at all. We just cared whether or not they were good salespeople and could go out in the field and have a conversation. Doesn't work anymore. Because now, we all know this in our markets, okay? The alignment in the market, pretty much everybody is as tight could be. There's not a whole bunch of doctors just sitting out there going, I don't know where to send my business, or I'm going to send it wherever. Everybody's very tightly aligned, which means now I got to be very tight on analyzing who I'm talking to and what very specific piece of business do I have an opportunity to win. Probably the same in your space on the consumer side of this. It's segmentation, it's all of those things. Data feeds it. We didn't have data 10 years ago, 20 years ago. We didn't have this kind of data. We have data now that tells us a lot more than what we did before from that perspective. So it's a good thing to say, well, what do I have? I often thought back to, I use that DISC example. I had a marketing team, okay? We shared the floor with the finance team, okay? They were on one side, we were on the other, but all on the same floor. You can only imagine. So when you think about that disc, okay, I had a bunch of probably steadies and compliance on one side of the floor, and then over here, I had a bunch of intuitives and drivers, okay? We were loud, we were messy, we had stuff everywhere all the time. When we had meetings, we started a meeting, usually in a fun sort of way, and then you got down to business from that perspective. If I went over to the finance department, there was nothing on their desks, nothing. Everything was always organized by files, all of those sort of things. And when you went to talk to them about something, very methodical about how they talked about things and from that perspective. But what I also realized in that whole piece, so there was that piece of just the difference in the two departments, but I also realized I had an entire team of idea people. A bunch of intuitives and drivers, which are full of ideas. Now, most marketing departments are idea people. We are idea people. But I didn't have any implementers. I just had a whole bunch of people that came up with ideas. And we struggled to get them done. So it was a clue to me, oh my gosh, I gotta hire some people who are doers. And that looked different than the idea people. Because I loved anyone who came in who had done really great marketing, creative type work, building new things, doing different things, all of that where the ideas came from them. And I had a great team of idea people. When it came to putting anything together, no, we were a mess. So in this space, this gave me that piece to be able to say, this is what we need to do from that perspective. So let's talk hiring. So hiring, this is the traditional hiring process, okay? I'm going to guess it looks like this in most of your organizations still today. You prepare a job description. You probably already have one. Maybe you update them every so often. Then somebody does a job analysis that says, okay, this is the tier or the grade level it's going to sit in, and here's how much it's going to get paid and all that. And we knew certain words to put in that job description to get them to go up the grade scale, all those little things. And then if we had a job, we posted the job. So sometimes they just put the doggone job description right on out there or whatever, or maybe the first paragraph of that job description. People then applied. And then we did an interview, and based on that whole process, came down to making an offer somewhere. So today, let's look at it. Remember when I said people intend to leave, okay? I've worked with several organizations where I've seen this exact thing happen. We weren't getting any applications that amounted to a hill of beans. So you hired somebody to go out and scour LinkedIn and contact people that fit somehow what you were looking for. So passive candidates. To me, there are all those people that are in that bucket, which is a lot of people, that are thinking about it but not doing a doggone thing about looking for a job. And then they get a call. And if things match up, and now they might just explore you. This is where I say HR's got to be on their toes. Like, make sure they understand if they came from a field where that they pay a lot of money, what the salary range is for the job. Because I always say in the salespeople world, salespeople will sell you all day long, and they will tell you, well, yeah, I know that's what you told me that it pays, but I can talk you into something more. It's like because they're salespeople. But that passive candidate. So if we're thinking about, well, I'm going to just put my job out there, and I'm going to see what I get. Now, doesn't mean you hire somebody to do it. Sometimes that means it's us out there putting stuff on LinkedIn, looking in LinkedIn for people who match what I'm looking for. But that passive piece. This filling of the candidate funnel. So we're going to talk about skills that are needed to be successful. But if I'm looking for a very specific type of candidate with a certain skill set, okay, why wait till I have a job opening? Let me fill the funnel with people. Now, I can do it all on LinkedIn, guys. You can just create relationships on LinkedIn. So the time you have the job, you already say, I've got 3 people I'm reaching out to. I've kept in contact with them, all of those, so I'm keeping the relationship. It's not easy work, guys. It takes a commitment. But that's the filling of the candidate funnel. Your HR people probably do this too. I don't know that I would trust them to do it as well as you will do it, because you know what you need. They probably do it better in the nursing field, in the clinical field, and all of those better than they will for us from that perspective. Everything is electronic, of course we all know that. The fascinating piece to this though is how you get your resume to pop, okay? So I've talked to a lot of people who are looking for jobs and how they say it's just virtually impossible anymore, you know, unless you know somebody. There's no way you're gonna get it in. The key word piece is the in, and how I put what words in what places on, so it's a skill in itself. But you're doing the same thing when you're looking for them. And the whole, does anybody in your HR department, is AI driving any of making resumes pop, applicants pop? Yeah, based on certain sort of, they predict who is the right candidate for you. I would say most healthcare organizations aren't doing that yet, or maybe not in our field from that perspective, but that's where it is from that perspective, which is why I say, okay, get into LinkedIn. LinkedIn to me is the best vehicle we have to be able to connect with all the right people from that perspective. So that's the hiring process for today. So what makes a good candidate? So have this conversation about, see the bubbles, the biggest on the skills. What are the skills that are required to do this? To do the job that you need? What are the skill sets that I need to have in place? I'm going to give you an example here in a second. Now, again, it's in physician relations, but you'll get the gist of it. And then there's the fit. Are they a fit for not only the organization, okay, but are they a fit for your team? Are they a fit for, you know, when I was just talking about those skills that I'm missing from that perspective. That's a little in that fit bucket too. But also, are they just a fit for what the organization is? You know, we had a client we were working with in California, academic medical center, okay, and they were 100% opposed to ever using the word sales for their liaisons. Could not ever use the word sales. That's a fit thing. So if you're hiring someone who's a salesperson into that organization who lives and drives from a sales perspective, something's not going to match right there, because it's not a sales-driven organization from that perspective. And the last one on this is that potential piece. That's the piece we were talking about with the career ladder. So if you look at all three of those, but I want to know, can I grow them? Do they want to grow? If they don't want to grow, they just want to come in and do a really, really good job. Is that okay? Or do I need, or am I looking for people that I can advance through my career ladder in one way, shape, or form? So that potential piece is one that I think we always could spend more time on and think more about. So when you think about hiring for skill set, this kind of goes back to the slide I was just showing you before, but when you think about hiring for skill set, so when any of you have an open position, what's the first thing we do? We look at a resume. And what's the first thing we look at on the resume? Experience. Have they done this type of job before? And when you think skill set, well, that might tell you they did it. Or it might tell you they didn't. But first thing we go to is, do they have the experience? So that's that whole piece of hiring for skill versus hiring based on work history. Now, I'm not saying throw the work history out, because your HR department is going to tell you it's going to have the work history. They got to have this much experience or whatever. I'm going to guess there's been times when I have had this many times where I've tried to finagle, where I thought was the best ideal candidate who didn't have enough work experience. But I saw something in them. But they weren't going to fit the job requirements because they didn't have enough work experience. And so then you try to finagle their resume to be able to figure out how to, you know, when you think about that kind of craziness. But if it was purely based on skills that they brought to the table, that might have looked different. Now, again, our HR departments do this in a very different way, so we got to be able to work with them from that perspective. But I'm going to say this line, and if you're going to forget anything in this whole presentation or whatever, I'm going to use Maxine's piece of surprise or whatever. It's that piece. Less about work experience and more about can they do the job from that perspective. So let's talk a little bit about skills and abilities. And I'm really watching my time here. So skills are those behaviors I can teach. I usually can teach skills. If I don't have a natural ability, though, I got to know those two, okay? So there's the skill piece of it, you know, because we always, it's from a sales perspective, I can teach you what sales is, but you pretty much have to come to the table with a natural ability to be able to sell. And there are certain things in all of us that naturally we come with that tells us we can be successful in that. The same thing is going to be in many of the same positions you have. It's like, what's the natural thing I need them to come to the table with? You know, I often think about, well, if I'm going to base something on skills, okay, and I find the ideal candidate, but they lack some, this is the biggest challenge I see all the time is, they've never worked in healthcare. Well, healthcare's not easy. You know, we are complicated. Nothing's easy about it. It's not like you're selling a widget. And, you know, it's like all of those pieces, even when you think of consumer behavior as it relates to healthcare, is complicated. So I have to ask myself, does somebody have the natural ability to be able to learn? Do they have desire to be able to learn? Do they come with their own piece of wanting to learn it? Or am I going to constantly have to be trying to get them to do it? In other words, I'm spoon feeding them versus they have a natural ability to how they're going to look for it from that perspective. This is the example I'll give you. We did this with an organization that was struggling hard to try to find the right talent in the liaison space. You could do this same thing for any jobs that you're looking for, okay? It's like, what are the skills that I need? What's the natural abilities, that natural aptitude piece that I need? And then I'm just throwing stuff in the middle that I say, I can't live without this stuff. They got to come to the table with some of this sort of thinking, okay? You could take, if you took that headline off of there and says successful liaison, okay? You could probably get a little idea of what this job would be because you'd go, well, I'm guessing it's got something to do with sales, okay? But not exactly. So they are all things that are important to be successful in the roles that you're looking to hire from that perspective. You know, when we think of, when I think of that, like that middle piece of it right there, this whole, you know, being analytic, I told you about the data piece of it. But analytic is also, just in sales in general, is an important skill that I need somebody to be able to have because I need them to be able to go in and when they're having a conversation, they know just the right questions to be able to ask, to be able to uncover information I need, okay? You all do probably the same thing in your space. I need to uncover something, so I got to know the right question to ask from that perspective. That quick and self-learner, that came out of this mostly because hospitals and health systems are not sales organizations. We are not a sales, there is no send you away for 30 days to learn the product you're going to sell inside and out, know how to ask all the right questions, talk about all the clinical depth that you need to be able to even know what's the right thing to say with when a patient presents with blank, what do you do in terms of making a referral? When do you make that referral? All those sorts of things sit in that space. So if someone can't come in and gives me clues in an interview that they can't do that, then I'm like, they're off the list. Because I know we don't have it built for it to be spoon-fed to them. I often say in these types of role, pharma people, really good salespeople, really good salespeople, and they've been trained really well. They send them away for a month or whatever. But I've made this mistake myself. I've hired them before. They know how to sell or whatever, but they want it to be spoon-fed to them. You've got to give it to me. And we don't have time to give it to you. You got to figure it out. Now, we have some responsibility. We'll do that here in a second. But that's a big piece of this. I'm not going to spend a lot on this other than rethinking job description, okay? It's like, do I, in my job description, does it outline clearly the skills that I'm looking for and what some of that natural aptitude might need to be from that perspective? What other roles require a similar thing? So that's a little of when I was showing in this slide here. You know, there's probably a lot of jobs that all of this sits in that people do. So when you get to the work experience piece of it, it might not be this role. It might not be a marketing role in a hospital or a health system. It might have been in something else from that perspective. That's what that piece is. That's hard work. I won't tell you it's either. And this future potential is that piece we talked about. What's the potential? Can I grow them? All of those pieces. This is, do you guys have this deck? Because I was going to say, some of this is good.
We have it.
You do? Okay.
Yeah,
because I was going to say, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Yeah. Oh, okay. Because if you want it, just give me your card afterwards, and I'm happy to send it to you also. The competency-based interview questions. I learned the hard way how to do really good interviewing because I had some bad hires. And I will tell you, you will learn quickly in a bad hire. And what's the first thing you say in a bad hire? What happened to that person I interviewed? That is not the person sitting in front of me anymore. And I learned it really quick that I was like, well, you didn't uncover any of that because you didn't ask the right questions in the interview. So there's a lot of really, you can Google this and find hundreds of really good, and I'll tell you where I got a lot of really good competency-based interview questions that I customized for the roles that I was looking for was from my HR people. One of my favorite ones that I got from doing an interview with our VP of HR for some executive position. I'm not even sure why I was in it, but I was in it. And it was the most fascinating interview ever because she was good at how she interviewed. But one of them was that, you know, when you have a resume with somebody that shows that they have a lot of experience and they've been doing this job for a while and good expertise in there, I love to ask them, what's the one thing you're still trying to master? Because it forces them to think about, and when they can't answer you very quickly, it means they're thinking really way too hard from all of those. But there's a lot of things that you can ask in this space to uncover things about somebody's skill set in those pieces, and they've got to give you examples from that perspective. I don't really have time, because to give you more, but you'll find it in how you do that. Okay, so let's go into great performers. Okay, this is the onboarding side of it. And you all might have really strong onboarding plans when you bring new people in. Because, I mean, the stronger that is, the better it is. I give you this, and there's a couple of good things in here that to me were a good learning thing from that perspective. Obviously, we know the retention piece that helps us from that perspective. If I've done really good onboarding, that they stay longer. But this fulfillment piece, I call it, it's the happiness quotient. You know, are they fulfilled? And it says on here, do they think it's the best job they've ever had? I say we strive for that. I want my people to say it's the best job I've ever had, which means they love the company, they love the work they're doing, they love the department and the people they're in, they love you as a leader. All those things I want to go, we nailed it from that perspective. We helped them grow, all of that. That engagement is the helping them grow piece. If somebody, like I said at the beginning, if someone gives you a clue that that's really important to them, do not wait. Think about what that looks like all along. And start really quickly with it. I often think back to an interview I was doing. It was for a marketing role, a regional marketing director role, and this was in Dallas. And I was interviewing with the VP of, I think it was communications, or maybe it was Marcom, I'm not really sure. And I forget what she asked me, and what I told her was, I want your job. I was clear. I was very clear that I'm looking not to stay right here, but I'm looking to grow. It never happened. I left because it never happened. But it to me was, and I often think to myself, if someone were to say that to me, I would also want to be, if that was not a possibility, let's have some realistic conversations about that. And so it's a very, to me, it's a really good one in this engagement type of piece to really think about what does somebody need and want. And if they want to just do a really good job and come in every day and do a really good job, then help them to do a really good job from that perspective. Performance, it's always one of those when I do interviews, Drew, when I say, well, what would success look like after the first 90 days? When they're out there in left field with like, I expect to bring in all this volume and do all this stuff, I want to go, oh my gosh, you're going to be sorely disappointed because you'll barely be in the field by that time or whatever. I like to listen to that and set expectations for that one too. Like I want them to know what that looks like. I won't get into this, but most of you have probably done this. This is a fascinating thing to do too. When you look at the generations and what's important to them, which is saying a lot about why people are moving and doing things they're doing right now, it kind of fits into this whole piece of looking at the generational piece of this. There's lots of good stuff. It's another one to me that you can Google on and really find a lot. I had a lot of Gen Xers that reported to me at one time. I had to learn Gen Xers. I had to really learn Gen Xers. They valued their independence, but they also, because they grew up in households that never wanted to be told anything but that they were wonderful. Those kids could never ever hear that things weren't good or they didn't like to lose. And they expected to be able to get titles and get roles just like that. Now, if you earned it, I'm all for it, but to just think you get it. Was a very interesting thing with Gen Xers. So it was something for me that I had to really learn and understand. How did I keep these folks engaged? Because they think differently than what I thought from that perspective. This is a tool for you as well, too. This is just when you think about the journey of onboarding. So many times the pre-onboarding is, I want them to feel, I call it the wisdom of their decision. They chose you. They want to be with you. I want them to understand and feel the wisdom of that decision. They made a really good decision. And that to me starts on day one. But you see each one of the welcoming and belonging is right up front. It's right up front. What used to drive me nuts in organizations was when I had to fight forever to be able to get the computer all set up and all that stuff that you expect. Like, people need to have stuff when they start on day one. And if they don't have stuff, then they think, well, gosh, either you didn't value me or you're not very organized. So all of those pieces play into it from that perspective. This is also, I would say, use this tool to say, where should they be? 90 days goes really fast. Any of you that have hired somebody and somebody didn't work out? And 90 days goes really fast. Now, some organizations, I'm not saying but if somebody's in the 90-day mark, might not be a fit either for them, for you, for the organization, all of those pieces. I want my eyes attuned to it. And I'm amazed at how, because we're all busy. We're at day number 89, and we go, shoot. And then that just creates a different piece of it. So it's really good to look at where should they be. I like to have good measures to be able to say, well, are they ahead or are they behind? Because if they're behind, then I need to put some things in place to be able to help them get there. If they're ahead, let's push them. Keep them going. Because they're ahead. Let's not keep them in a stagnant place. I want to push them and keep them going from that perspective. Okay. Coaching. So now I've got them. I've onboarded them. And I want to continue to grow them. I only stick this in here because I need this constantly to remind myself what coaching means. I learned from somebody a long time ago when they said, you should always ask somebody if they're up for coaching, because coaching doesn't do anything if somebody doesn't want to listen on the other end. Then we're just doing a bunch of talking, but somebody needs to be up for coaching. And it's our job to sense, even when they say yes, whether they really are. From that perspective. But what I love about this piece is that it's allowing someone to learn. Coaching is allowing someone to learn in a way that they advance or that they progress or that they improve, whatever that might be. But it's a way in which they learn, which means I've got to understand how they want to learn and where they want to be from that perspective. It's not about telling somebody. Telling somebody is a very different thing than I'm asking you to help you. I always say really, really good coaches, this was Allison's piece of it, okay, that wasn't here today. Allison is a leadership coach, and Allison is really good at, she never tells you the solution. She guides you to where you figured out the solution. Now my job then as a leader when somebody gets there is, now I'm going to hold you accountable for it. We're all on the same page. I'm going to be accountable to help you be accountable, because I would say that's where we fall apart as leaders, is that we all get busy and we go, well, darn it, I wasn't very accountable there. And I take issue with that personally from that perspective. So it's a really good thing. I don't need to spend a lot of time on this one. We have 5 minutes, and I didn't leave any time for you guys to talk. So I'm gonna skip right all over this because I know you know this. This speaks to the accountability piece of it. This be involved, number 4. We haven't talked very much about that, about being a problem solver. I've seen a lot of younger leaders. This is for those of you that are maybe putting some new folks into more management or leadership position, or maybe they haven't been before. Is that problems that come from staff, and they take on the problem. So the staff goes, oh, I can't do anything, and they go, let me take care of that. Nope. So if I always say good self-awareness to know whether or not you're taking all the problems off of their back and putting all the problem right on yours, versus doing it together and helping them be good problem solvers. Good team members to me are good problem solvers. And if I'm enabling them not a good thing. And that's a self-awareness thing from our perspective from that piece of it. Okay, done. Except I do want, and this was on LinkedIn this morning. I would have stuck it in there if I could have or whatever. This is by, did anybody know Loud Minds? I didn't either. But somebody had posted it, and it says, if you want to become a leader or are currently a leader, challenge yourself to do 3 of the below things every week, okay? So 3 of these things, there's 9 of them on here, okay? I'm not gonna go through all of them. But there were some of them I went, oh my gosh, that's so good. That's so good. Ask someone for the gift of feedback and accept it as a gift. Okay, so that was the first one. You know, we probably do that a lot, but sometimes we don't do it until we're like, oh, I need to ask this now, versus making it a part of what we do all the time. So this doesn't mean just to our team. This can be to our leaders. This can be to others in the organization that you work with, all of those things. It says even better, ask for feedback from someone on the front line, it says. I would say anyone else you might work with that affects the type of work you do, okay? And accept that as an extra special gift. So this feedback piece of it. Ask your team what is not clear, and then clear it up. I circled that one. I circled that one. Because I think so many times, well, it seems perfectly clear to me. I don't understand why somebody else doesn't think it's clear. But many, many times I'm like, how that lands with how somebody hears something or how somebody digests something is very different. So if you're asking your team members that on a regular basis, you'll also learn something about, ooh, this is how they always hear something, which might be very different than the person sitting next to them from that perspective. And then I love this one too, and then I'm going to stop. Reflect on your team's biggest problem and step back to see how big it really is. I thought that was great too. You know, we always hear the, we're struggling, or whatever, and you want to go, sometimes you got to step back and go, well, is it really a big problem? And maybe it is, or maybe it's not, but a good one. So yeah, Loud Minds. I'm hoping you can maybe find it if you're interested in it, but. Okay, so I took up every last bit of it, 3 minutes. Questions or thoughts or sharing? Well, thank you. It's been good. Enjoyed.